Today on the show, we talk about revamping your entire sales organization. Today, before we kick off this episode, I want to thank our sponsor, For You From Me by Raj Daniels. This book is phenomenal. If you know Raj Daniels, and you can check out episodes 1 and 2 of this show in order to get to know him a little bit better. If you know him, then you know what an inspiration he is, just in the guidance that he gives in his own life, person by person on a one-by-one basis. And his book is no different. It's really a clear vision of how you should be approaching life, presented in a way that is, it's simple to take action on. And that's so important these days. It's really meant to be taken, a chapter at a time, and then take that sort of lesson of the day and let it sink in, let it soak in, and kind of color your whole day. So make sure you check out For You From Me by Raj Daniels. It's on Amazon. Get you a copy right now. How's it going, everybody? Jason Croft here, the Credibility Craftsman, and I'm excited to bring you this interview today with Brian Williams. He is a powerhouse when it comes to not only being an amazing presenter on stage, and if you ever see one of his talks, you'll be blown away. But all of that is in service to getting inside of an organization and helping them evaluate their sales teams and really go through and not only hold up a mirror to see, so they can see where those deficiencies are, but now here's what we do about them. And it's so powerful. He goes through a system that he utilizes. We also touch on some things that, a lot of people don't mention when they talk entrepreneurship and they talk, hustle and grind, get out there and do it. Some things that are really tough with this. Some things he experienced when he started out, going from corporate to entrepreneurship. Brian Williams, welcome to the show.
Hey man, glad to be here. This is pretty cool.
This is a blast, man. This is so glad to have you on, and man, I'm gonna force you to give us some good nuggets, because you are a master at being on stage, at sales, at training folks. And I tricked him into coming into the car. He just wanted to ride over to Whole Foods. I said, nope, you're gonna give us a bunch of good information. Perspectivity is your company?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the company and that, and then we'll backtrack a little bit into some of the evolution that got you here.
Okay. So the company, primarily, we work with technology companies that have these world-class products and services and technology, but they struggle to effectively communicate it to the marketplace, and that obviously affects sales because confused prospects don't buy.
Right.
So we help them clarify that message, and then we create some sales tools and systems and strategies once we've clarified that message, primarily targeting tech companies in particular. Gotcha.
I want to dig into a lot of that, but what got you to this point? What's the background that's led to this?
So I was in Silicon Valley. My plan was to become a .com millionaire, man. And I was going to retire and do some other cool things. All the companies I worked for went bankrupt. Oh. So I had to come up with a plan B. And
that is not very nice of them to mess with your plan.
Oh man, you learn a lot about human psychology when you go through a failing company, though. So a lot of lessons learned, but ultimately I was at this huge, global company. They were buying a lot of tech companies, and the salespeople were like, we don't know what they bought. They all work differently, and my quota is going to get affected if I try to sell these things. Well, obviously that's a problem. So corporate basically said, listen, we spent $800 million on all these companies. The sales team, they aren't touching it. Can you help us? So they gave me $1 million test run, $1 million budget initially. And we had to create some sales, we had to make all those buyouts look like one, make it simple to understand.
Then like we train those things into one offering.
Yeah, because it is tough to try to sell them independently because there are different companies and different products, and so we have to equip the sales team on what are these technologies, how do they integrate into our existing service offering, then how do you package and pitch that to our existing customer base? And it was incredibly difficult. I will never do it again. I ended up with a team of about 20 plus people in 4 different countries. And after going through that experience though, and figuring out how to do all of that, I said, hey, you know what? Most people struggled to sell this stuff. I've helped them figure out how to do it. So why don't I go do that for other companies? So I left the company, started this firm, made a U-turn, went right back into those companies, showing them how to do it.
That one thing that you said you would never go do.
Exactly. Well, now they have to do it. I just showed them how to do it.
Right. That's a big difference.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I mean, what a great U-turn, right? Like, what a great way to take in that skill set. And what was your role in that company going into before that you were tasked with that?
The title was head of global business strategy, which basically meant, when a particular area isn't getting the revenue that they thought that it should, there was a tiger team of about 5 of us, and we would take on different projects to increase the revenue. And in my case, that's what the role, and that was like a 3-year project. Actually, it took us that long to get it up and running and have it running effectively, etc.
Yeah. So when you have this idea and you see that, okay, well, obviously this isn't unique to that company. Like, people are struggling all over the place with this. What's that first step in going and I'm gonna create this? I'm gonna create Perspectivity. I'm gonna create this offering.
Oh my gosh, man. It'd be cool if I could say, Jason, I had the vision and I sat down and planned
on December
12th. Yeah. It was chaos. It was absolute madness, to be honest with you. So here's the deal, right? So I leave corporate and I start the company. Well, actually, I partnered with a guy first who needed some help. He was doing some work at Disney and some other places. He says, man, you're a sharp guy. You could totally help us. I'm a little overwhelmed. And I said, well, I can learn more about the business. So we got started, and then eventually we were, he was basically having me come in and work in the business. And one of the things I did is I said, hey, you know what? Since we're forming this partnership, I heard about this book called The Partnership Charter, which I recommend anyone forming a partnership to read.
Nice.
And I said, and you can hire him, and he'll kind of help you know whether you're going to be compatible or not. And he said, not interested. That should have been a
red
sign.
Flag 1, right?
Right. I should have made another U-turn right at that point. But you know what? The heart of an entrepreneur is we're going to break down walls. Sometimes walls are there for a reason, right? So anyway, it was a disaster. We ended up splitting. It was horrible. It got a little messy. Attorneys got involved. Fortunately, when I finally got an attorney, because I tried to avoid going that route.
Sure. When
I got the attorney, he basically squashed everything this attorney did. And so afterwards is when I formed my company out of that disaster.
Gotcha.
And we had moved here from California, so I didn't have a huge network here. I hadn't been living here.
About what year was this?
This was 2012. In fact, it'll be 6 years next month.
Nice.
Since the launch of the company.
Very nice.
And it was tough, man. It was really difficult. I remember my wife asking, she's used to paychecks every 2 weeks and, decent sized paychecks. And she said, so what are we going to do now? And for the first time in our marriage, I gave this answer: I don't know. Because I didn't know. And yes, it was pretty scary.
And it takes quite a spouse to go, all right, let's figure this out.
Absolutely.
And stay there.
Great point. Yeah. Great point. And any entrepreneur who's married, she's an entrepreneur whether she wants to be or not, because she's riding those he is riding that roller coaster, that emotional roller coaster, just the same. In fact, a good friend of mine and I, we were going somewhere last night, and he said his wife told him for the first time, I can't do it anymore.
Wow.
And he told me, he said, but this time she said it without tears and without crying. She was like, no, I just can't. And he said, he knew it's
This
time.
is the real one.
Yeah, it's time. So we have to be sensitive to that as entrepreneurs, because what you read in the magazines and the press is like, keep driving, keep pressing, all gas, no brake, right?
Yep.
And you will find yourself miserable, divorced, and lonely. Because again, sometimes walls are built for a reason, right?
Yep.
Sometimes they're there for a reason. So it was a really rough start, right? It's a really rough start.
So what do you do with that? Is it what do you go after first? Do you go to build that network and try to get in front of people first, or is it straight to marketing or knocking on doors? Like, is it all of it?
Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. I knew I had a passion. I knew I could help people. I didn't realize when I was in corporate, I had this massive support system, right? Doing all these different things. And somehow in this little brain of ours, I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to go out, build this thing and make a U-turn and go back. Not that easy. So initially, I think most entrepreneurs, right, start with their network, their first line of network. So friends and family and people that I've been knowing, people who know me, trust me, like me, and know I'm going to take care of them, right? And so I started there, and then they can tell people, right? But ultimately, here's what I've learned in the evolution of a company. You start with people you know and with people they know, and that'll get you somewhere. You can make some progress with that.
Maybe start some momentum. Yeah.
Absolutely. But ultimately, to me, the definition of sales is convincing a stranger who doesn't know you or your product and convince them to become a client.
Yep. That's
sales to me.
And yeah, that's when you feel it inside, like, oh, I can do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. So fast forward, you've got this thing rolling.
Mm-hmm.
You've made it into something. What's sort of the first iteration of all this, of your offering to folks?
It's interesting. So when we started, we were kind of doing sales presentations, because I was doing a lot of that in corporate, really kind of business presentations, doing a lot of that in corporate. And a good friend of mine, he runs this marketing agency in Chicago, and he sold it, had a really cool exit. And we were on the phone one day, and he says, man, you know what? He said, I don't really get a headache if my guys give a bad presentation. But he said if they're giving bad sales presentations and it begins to affect my revenue, now I'm staying up at night. And that one conversation started a pivot in the organization by saying, maybe we need to look at what we're doing. Like, we can make more impact by impacting their sales skills as opposed to just their presentation and communication skills.
Gotcha. So
then that to me is a rather complex component to add to what we were doing, but it paid off really well for us.
Oh,
and he was right. Turned out he was right.
And so what does that look like now? You mentioned those three layers that you go in and help companies with. Kind of break those down for us, and why are those each critical to hit, and how are you helping people in those areas?
Sure. So, we start every engagement the same. There's actually 4. I left one out. So when we come in, we just kind of take this x-ray, an assessment, if you will, and we look at their sales strategy. Like, what's your target market and what message are you communicating? Does that message that you have resonate with that particular market? Can you clearly identify the market? Like, what is the sales strategy, your practices, and procedures that you have inside the organization? So strategy is number one. Then we take a look at your structure, meaning accountability, which is huge with sales professionals. The compensation plan, is that structured accordingly? Is it designed to create momentum inside of the sales professionals to make them want to keep growing and keep growing your revenue?
Right, to not have a ceiling there.
Absolutely. Or not paying them too much so they don't want to do a whole lot.
Right.
It's another challenge we see a lot. So the structure is number 2. So strategy number 1, structure number 2, your staff is number 3, where we come in and we do an assessment of your people. I interview them. We have a sales assessment like this, Myers-Briggs, but this one is specifically for sales professionals.
Oh, nice.
And I role play with them. I have them sell to me, I'll sell to them. And I can kind of get a pretty good idea on whether this person's going to make it or not.
Yeah.
And then the 4th one is systems. What software, CRM, ERPs, like what kind of systems are inside the organization Does it run efficiently, effectively, and most importantly, do the salespeople even want to use it? That's a big problem we see.
Really?
They don't have insight into the pipeline and the revenue targets because the guys or the people aren't using the software that's been available. And a lot of times it's just too complicated.
Right.
And it's slowing them down and they don't want to fool with it.
So what's the remedy at that point? At any of these, whether it's the software or any of the other recommendations that you see, like, hey, here's the data, man. here's what you got to do, and you've got pushback on all that. What's the solution there?
This is what's interesting, right? So great question, by the way. So when we go through those 4, right? Strategy, structure, staff, systems, I just ask them to assess themselves. We have a conversation around each one, and I say, hey, 1 to 10, like, how would you rate, where you guys are? And they grade themselves. I don't. I'm just the doctor taking the x-ray, right? And I just put the film up on the wall, and I say, I see a fracture and a spot, and we're not sure what this is here, right? And they just look at it, and they look at each other and go, what are we going to do about this, right? So that starts the conversation.
Holding up that mirror.
Absolutely. Because think about it, right? The one voice that every human believes the most is their own.
Sure.
So I get them to say where they are. It's a self-assessment of the sales organization ultimately that they actually grade. I'm just writing the numbers that they say. So in the end, based on that, how they rate themselves, and I'll kind of help them out a little bit by saying, hey guys, I think you're a little better than a 2, right? Because you've done this and this. Okay, 3 is fair. And we kind of have that conversation. And based on the end of that conversation, it's pretty clear what we need to do, because wherever we're scoring the lowest, that's probably impacting revenue the greatest. And those 4 areas, if you're thriving in each of those 4 areas, you have a very healthy sales organization, which ultimately impacts revenue.
Oh yeah, that's huge. And so, where are some of? So, at that point, are they off to the races, or are there layers that you stay involved and like get them to stage 2 now?
I see. So we can decide whether we're going to attack all 4 of those areas or which one we want to do first. We have a conversation around that, and then we basically have a few ways in which we approach it. A lot of it is just consulting and conversations and asking a lot of questions to kind of help them navigate forward. Then we created I released a book about 6 months ago that captures a lot of what we do.
Nice. What's that called?
It's the Ultimate Sales Messaging System. So we kind of we have a 6-step system that we've created. The first 3 deals with how to design the message, be it a presentation or conversation. And then the last 3 show you how to deliver that message according to the science of how adults learn and the psychology of how adults make buying decisions.
Oh, brilliant.
That's the foundation in which those 6 steps are built upon. So, and we have an online university that teaches those same 6 principles as well. And so between the book, the online university, and our in-house consulting, we begin kind of helping them navigate their way with new sales presentations. We have marketing agencies we partner with that may have to update the website or some marketing material, things like that.
Those things that came out in the X-ray.
Exactly.
Right. That's great. So what's some of the big turnarounds that you've seen? What are some recent, you don't name companies or anything like that by any means, but some big, just blatant, hey, they were missing this, and it just, could we, I guess that just to have some of that real world example.
Sure. Understood. This is there's a few, but my favorite is this story because it is the most difficult sell on the planet, I think. And that is a private equity company that were having these fancy dinners for these wealthy individuals or family offices.
Okay.
So I think you had to have somewhere like 3 or 5 million liquid to even be invited to the meeting, right?
Gotcha.
And so the private equity company, who's my client, is pitching to these people at these fancy dinners, and they just weren't converting anything, right? One, it's because they're very intelligent people, they're very successful, and they're getting pitched all the time.
I imagine. Yeah.
They're always getting, and they've heard everything. So to impress them is rather difficult. So anyway, they're not getting anyone to buy in to their fund. And this private equity company were investing with these small tech startups, these technology companies. Okay. So anyway, we began working together, and we work on their message, their sales presentation, their strategy, and we work on how to deliver that. And the first meeting that they had, or dinner after that, they had like 2 or 3 people sign up like that night. And he says normally they book a follow-up meeting and they always say no at the follow. He said they didn't even need a follow-up meeting, signed up right away.
Wow.
And he told me later that he says everyone in the room didn't sign up, but he said every single event that we had from that point forward, at least 1 or 2 people minimum sign up.
Oh, that's
with our
huge.
Fund. And they ended up firing me because they didn't need me anymore, which is what they're supposed to do, right? And it worked out great. But it's a really cool story because that audience was just so difficult because they're so sharp, and they have advisors and teams that help them make these decisions and things like that. So they were really struggling, but fortunately we had a really good outcome.
And that particular solution was simply the messaging around, like, to communicate their offering better? Or?
You know what was interesting? They're really smart people, and it just wasn't clear. Like, see, when we communicate, you have to communicate in such a way that it conveys value to the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
So just because you're sharing something that's super cool from your own perspective, they have to be able to see themselves winning in your story.
Yeah, it's got to go through that filter.
Absolutely. Right. So when you go through those 4 S's I just walked through, that's your business, your story. I haven't pitched any of our products and services.
Yeah.
We're just taking an x-ray of your organization. And if the results of those x-ray, you grade yourself a 7 here, I agree, 8 here, 6, 7, you don't need me. Guys, make these 2 adjustments here and keep on moving.
Yeah.
And I'll go talk to someone else. But if that's not the case, then we might have to sit down and have a conversation.
Right. So I'm curious too, because I always like to talk to folks about how they're marketing themselves. And now, certainly you've had 6 years to kind of build up a network and things like that. How are you getting your messaging out there? How are you marketing the company right now?
Number one, 2 ways I'll answer that. Number one is what you're doing right now, video.
Awesome.
It is a powerful weapon.
I agree.
And here's when I had this epiphany. So I'm asked to speak at this event in California, and it's at this really nice hotel. And so they had lunch, and I was speaking right after lunch. So I approached the area they're eating outside, beautiful day like today. And I walk up to the table, and this lady says, "Hey, Brian, so great to see you again." And I have no clue who she is, right? And she goes on about this story. And at this point, I kind of play along initially. And then I run out of energy because I'm like, I have no clue who you are, and I'm tired of faking it, right? And so she says, "You spoke at this event in like Boise, Idaho or so." I've never even been to Idaho.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like, not exactly. So she's trying to figure it out. And then she finally stops and says, "Oh my gosh, I was watching your videos." And she felt like she knew me. Right?
Yep.
And I'm telling you, the light bulb went off right at that moment. I said,
awesome.
This woman feels like she knows me and has some kind of connection. Now, I will say, in order to pull that off, your videos have to be credible and authentic and genuine and vulnerable, right? Because that's what that human, because the subconscious brain, the mind, when it's watching a human being on video, it doesn't know that person. It sees a real body and a real person with real speech coming out. Mm-hmm. So that connection is made. So video is definitely one tool that we use more than we ever have before.
That's great.
And secondly, also what we're doing now is just building relationships, old school, shaking hands with people, getting to know them, trying to offer value. I mean, where you just picked me up from, just met a guy at a conference. We got to talking, had a really cool connection. Now I'm going to be meeting the CEO and the COO at a meeting next week based on that lunch we just had.
Perfect. Oh, that's great. That's so powerful. I mean, that's what I specialize in, the video side of things and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I always dig in, and I'm so impressed with the people who are doing it right. You know, because like you say, there's a way to get that across.
Right.
And part of it, and that's not necessarily the technical way, like the right camera, the right this, but it's the presenting yourself and engaging and, like you said, being vulnerable and open up, you know, and like, here's my story. And that takes some work, and it's not natural.
Right. Very true.
You know,
Very
to
true.
most of us, you know.
And I'm on stages, you know, a little bit, and I sometimes have to build up the energy to get behind the camera and get it going, because we don't always feel like that, and some days we feel like, I don't know if that's going to be good enough, and you know, and you see most people now, if you just take an iPhone and just do it, you don't need a lot of fancy equipment nowadays. It's really the content and the quality of the content. Now, I'm still a big believer in online marketing and landing pages and social media and things like that, but I gotta tell you, I'll tell you, if you put me in a race where, particularly for the industry that I'm in and what I serve, I think if you're doing B2C, selling products and toothpaste and toothbrushes, you can probably sell a lot of that online with that. But for service companies, right, where you have to go into the building, get to know their people, get to hear their internal problems, they're not just clicking on buttons online and then welcome you in like that, right? Just like a mom wouldn't hire a nanny just sight unseen off the web.
Right.
So what I found is, if you were just doing online marketing and I'm doing old school, getting on the phone, connecting with people, shaking hands, building relationships, I will outsell you long term. Because people buy from people they like, know, and trust. Now, we will leverage online marketing to start the conversation.
Exactly.
And video starts the conversation.
And that's the power of these tools right now. It's, if you're using them not as like an instead of, but it's all to facilitate that offline conversation.
Absolutely. Because ultimately that's what we're trying to get to. And I'll tell even entrepreneurs watching, right, is use those tools to initiate the conversation so that you can either get them on the phone or a face-to-face, or even virtual, like having some, Skype or Zoom or something like that, goes a long way in terms of building rapport and building a connection. So they'll eventually, either you help them or they help you in some kind of way.
Right. And I find that it comes in several stages, right? Like it's a great way to initially reach out. It's a great tool for, researching that person. Right. And it's also fantastic after that real life meeting, just for maintenance, right? Like that follow-up. It's never been easier.
No doubt. Here's the thing that I find where a lot of companies miss, though, and that is they pitch a lot. They're asking for things. You connect with someone on LinkedIn, very next message, hey, Brian, I read your profile. And then the very next sentence, they go into what they do. Right. It's like, if you read my profile, you would know I don't need your service, right? So you obviously did not read my profile. So, in fact, I reached out to this lady on LinkedIn, and, we connected. And so I said, and I read her profile. When I connect, I read the whole profile, people I'm trying to, have an interest in. Yeah. And I noticed way down on the profile, she rode Harley Davidson motorcycles, which I know nothing about motorcycles. I don't ride one, but I commented, I think it is so cool that's what you do, and it's a great outlet for you, I'm quite sure. I mentioned she had just started a new position. I mentioned that. She replied right away, oh my God, you have no idea how much I enjoy riding my bike. You had to read my profile because it's so low inside of my profile. So obviously we connect because
that's great.
Give, then receive. Give, in fact, I will say give, then receive. And you'd be surprised at how much people are willing to engage when they found that you've expressed an interest. Because we're all humans, and every human have those three basic needs: to be loved, to have connection, and to feel like they belong.
Absolutely.
So if we could spend our time helping other people feel like that, and it has to be genuine, because I thought it was quite interesting that she wrote this big Harley, and she responded accordingly.
And that's the thing too. It's like people get caught up sometimes when they're new to this, that just by deciding you're going to engage and you're going to find something interesting, that's disingenuous.
Right.
But it's truly not. It's purposeful.
Sure.
It's intentional. And now I'm going to go engage because I truly want to, engage with this person, right? Because something's just telling me there might be something here.
Sure.
But you go into it with like, that's the difference. Like going into it going, I'm going to find out if there is. Or going into it like, no matter what, I'm doing a deal with this person.
I know it.
That's two very different animals.
Absolutely. And people, they sense that, right? If they know that you're trying to, best thing my grandfather ever told me, he said, all money ain't good money, son. And I love that line because it applies in sales. Now, I know people are probably saying, this guy's a sales professional, sales trainer. He's telling people all money ain't good money. Well, it's true because every deal may not be good for them. It may not be good for you. And I think it's up to us as professional sales people and business owners to do deals where it's mutually beneficial. I had a situation where it's a Fortune 50 client, huge client in Silicon Valley, but the team they asked me to work with were in Atlanta. And so, I flew out there, worked with them, and it became pretty clear to me, I don't know, a few weeks in that they really didn't want this, right? The people in California wanted them to have it. Right. They weren't trying to hear it. So I called them up and it was a little awkward and uncomfortable, right? I said, you know what? I think you might want this more than they do. And now, this was his response. He says, Brian, I really appreciate you sharing that. We've been wrestling over that for a couple of months minimum.
Wow.
And your feedback, and he asked me, what did I mean by that? I explained. He said, your feedback is so insightful because you're a third party outside source having the same observation in 3 weeks that we've had for a few months. And they made some uncomfortable decisions after that. Yeah. And we ended up having to terminate that. But guess what? I have done 3+ deals. I just talked to them this morning. We're doing another deal with them right now because I believe, he says, any sales guy who terminates a contract, I can probably trust for his good.
Oh, yeah.
And to my detriment,
right.
I can probably trust the guy. And we have a pretty cool relationship as a result, actually.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, what an incredible show of trust in that situation and just honesty. And that's fantastic. Well, how do people get in touch with you and bring you in and stalk you on the internet and all that stuff?
So LinkedIn is probably I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. I have a team that we post content that we believe helps people, videos. So it's Brian Williams URL. I probably should change it and make it something cool. But for today, it's Brian with an I, LinkedIn, .com/n and Brian Williams URL. And the email is brian@perspectivityintl.com. And you just go to the website as well, perspectivityintl.com.
That's perfect, man. Thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks so much for checking out this interview. Had a blast driving around with Brian and getting some of those insights because I'm always curious about a couple of things. One, how to get better at sales and how to help other people get better as well, and to have those systems that he's got in place to go in and evaluate companies. I'm fascinated by that, and I'm so impressed. And I'm also always wondering, like I mentioned in the interview, how are you marketing yourself? And I know he's strong in video and does a really good job with that. But it's great to get that insight from someone doing it to see how it's working for them. That's certainly what I do for a living with all of this. So, and in fact, along those lines, if you need help creating content like this, a show of your own, a series of videos, definitely reach out to me, Jason at croftmediaco.com. Be glad to help. And if you like interviews like this, make sure you subscribe here on the channel, and we'll see you next time.
It's Saturday night. It was Saturday night and I'm feeling kinda silly. Winter coat on cause the air was chilly, but I'ma make my way out to the record spot. Gotta find some new breaks for the beats to rock. I gotta come with the flavor like some lifesavers. On now and later, Dr. Beat Maker. If I'm a player, it's like your tape deck. And if you miss the gig, then take a rain check. Stacks of wax piled high to the ceiling. Need a U-Haul truck if I would think about stealing, but it's not my steam, so I commence with the digging, no kidding. Something that'll keep the beats hitting what I'm getting. So much to choose from, bro.